What's up, gold miners? Today, we welcome Jack Bosch to the program. Jack is the creator of the land profit generator land flipping method. You've definitely heard of house flipping before, but have you ever heard of land flipping? In today's episode, you're going to learn everything that you ever wanted to know and more about land flipping from the creator of the land profit generator land flipping methodology himself. We start off the episode with Jack explaining land flipping, how to find these land flip deals, and which markets you should be looking in to find these kinds of opportunities. Later on in the episode, Jack creatively shares how to create passive income opportunities through these land flipping deals. And then finally, we conclude the episode with Jack going over some of the potential roadblocks and hurdles to be aware of as you start doing more and more land deals. Jack has done over 5,000 land flipping deals in his life and now teaches hundreds of students on how to replicate his success. He is a wealth of knowledge. So without further ado, everyone, let's welcome to the show, Jack Bosch.
The Gould Mine Podcast.
Jack, welcome to the Gold Mine.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I am stoked, my man. It's this is a very interesting subject, a very interesting niche that you've managed to really excel in. And land flipping is not something that you hear every day. And when I saw it, I was quite intrigued. I was like, hold on, like, what do you mean land flipping? So for the people at home that really are perhaps not as privy to what that actually means, because when you say land flipping, what is the broad definition of that?
I'm trying to center myself here, so I'm good in the picture for you. So what does land flipping mean? Great question. So everyone has heard about house wholesaling and house flipping, right? So technically land flipping is in a way the same thing, just simpler. So, and actually it's the wrong term in a way, because flipping usually means fix and flipping. Right. Now, when we termed our method land flipping, we didn't know that flipping was tied to fix and flipping. So because we basically said, we basically get a piece of land, cheap under contract, we turn around, we sell it. So we're flipping it to somebody else, but without any of the hassles of the house flipping. So in other words, if you've heard of house wholesaling and so on, then typically that works. I mean, everyone knows that. You go get a house for a discount, find somebody who's willing to sell it for you at a steep discount or steeper kind of discount, put it under contract, and then you simply pass it on to a fix and flipper who then does the fix and flip and sells it. In essence, we're doing the exact same thing, except there's no fix and flipper. So we basically figured out how to find the people that in the United States are now no longer interested in owning their piece of land. There's 46 million pieces of land in the United States. At any given time, about 5% of them are people that don't want these properties anymore. So at any given time, there's 2.3 million pieces of land out there that you can pick up at sometimes discounts of up to 90%, meaning sometimes we buy these properties from 10 cents on the dollar, 20 cents on the dollar, and usually between 10 and about 60 cents on the dollar. We put them on a contract, and then we turn around, and then it becomes different from house wholesaling. We don't sell it to like a developer or so, but we sell it to an end user, somebody that just wants a piece of land, somebody that wants to build on it down the road, somebody that wants to hold on to it for appreciation. Somebody that perhaps, if it's a land outside of town, somebody that wants to go and build a house on that piece of land that's half an hour outside of town so that they have 5 acres to play on, to have a garden, to have some space, but still be in the city within half an hour. And a lot of people would love to live close to the city, but not in the city. And then we basically simply pass it on as a bargain. So we get a $50,000 property under contract for 15, turn it, sell it to somebody else for 35, make a quick $20,000, do even a double closing where we don't even buy the property, or where we do buy the property, but we don't even use our own money, just pass it on. And it's classic wholesaling, just with land. And then sometimes it gets even better than that, because often we can actually sell these properties with seller financing, where the down payment pays for what we actually have to pay to the seller. So it's like cashless self-financing. Like you take a $70,000 property, put it on a contract for 20, sell it for 70, get a $20,000 down payment, and carry the rest for 10 to 15 years at $500-$600 a month, and you have cash flow with no money in the deal. So it's a really cool strategy, low risk, low exposure, low competition, because as you said, most people don't even, you haven't come across a whole lot of us yet.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And there's so many different directions we could take this. But I think the first thing that's going to maybe pop into somebody's mind when they're hearing you describe this is, well, why would anyone ever sell? Right. And this is the classic question, right? In real estate, it doesn't just pertain to land. Why would anyone sell their property for such a massive discount, for pennies on the dollar?
Of course, that's a great question. Like, and in the housing world, we know why people sell their houses, because they're often in distress and things like that. But in the land area, there's actually multiple additional reasons for that. So by definition, actually, when you have a piece of land, it usually doesn't cash flow. So what that means is that it just sits there, right? You own a piece of land. Of course, could you rent it? Could you rent it if it's farmland? It's a different story. If it's like in the city, you could rent it to somebody to do like a farmer's market or something on it. Yeah. But those are far and in between. The usual land doesn't bring cash flow. We focus on three kinds of properties. First ones are infill lots. Think about a street, 35 houses, 2 empty lots. Nobody's going to bring income on that land. It just sits there and it costs your property taxes. Right? It costs property taxes. If it rains, the weeds grow. You got to get the maintenance guys on there. So it becomes a hassle over time. Right. Second kind of properties, like more like 1 to 10 acres, half an hour outside of town in a path of growth. Again, it just sits there and it produces, it costs property taxes. It costs some maintenance expenses and things like that. And the third kind of property is more like 10 to 100 acres, more like a mini ranch out more in the recreational areas. And it's the same thing. So it costs property taxes. But then what happens with the people we buy these properties from fall into one of like a few categories. First category is heirs. So we probably buy a third of the property from people who have inherited a piece of land. And here's the thing. If somebody inherits a land, inherits something from their parents, what do they really want? Money, right? They want the money. Right. Instead, they now inherited something. Like the average time it takes somebody to sell their parents' house. So parents pass away, parents own the house, the kids get the house. The average time until that house is up for sale is 72 days. Now, that's a crazy number because think about it. Wow. A house has an intrinsic value that you can actually make it cash flow. That's a free and clear house that they perhaps gotten from their parents. Why not keep that house and rent it? But instead, they're going and selling it to the fix and flippers at 30-40% discounts in order to get it out quickly. Well, right. In our case, it's even more discount because now you're inheriting something that costs you property taxes every single year. That costs you maintenance expenses. That costs you some hassles. That costs you code violations and things like that. And you're like, people don't want to deal with that. So basically, that's one of the reasons. They're not emotionally attached. They often inherit it. They got into divorces. Often also another thing happens, life and circumstances changes. So a lot of pieces of land is often, particularly the ones outside of town or on a beautiful lakefront lot or so in a rural lake, they were bought by a couple, married couple, and they wanted to build their retirement home now. But now the grandkids are born and the grandkids are 1,000 miles the other direction. So do they really want to go retire on the lake house that they wanted to build there? Or are they going to go closer to the family again to have the kids close by and see those grandkids? So bottom line, they're living thousands of miles away. They're sick and tired of paying property taxes. They're sick and tired of sometimes paying HOA fees. They don't want it. They have no emotional attachment. It's paid off. Land is typically paid off because lenders don't like to lend on land. So it just sits there as something that they don't no longer want. The kids don't want it. The grandkids don't want it. It just sits there and they're like, okay, well, it's a sunk cost. Let me just get something for it. So the discounts that they're willing to give you are substantially steeper than in the housing world because again, it doesn't bring them cash, but there's no benefit they're getting from owning that property while they own it.
That makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like you're finding people whose life circumstances changed and or heirs of property, which makes a lot actually. And that was as we were first going through this. That seems like the most logical lead source to me is like, all right, let's look for people who have, and let's be real, right, Jack? Like, most of these heirs, they have no idea what to do with these things, right? They're just completely like, and they don't even know the value, right? They're just
they don't know the value. They're not going to jump on a plane to go visit it, particularly if it's outside of town. They're like, I'm not going to go there. I don't care. My dad bought some stuff and let's just get rid of it. Oh, you're offering me 10 grand for it? Yeah, I'll take it. And then in reality, the property is worth 40. And then you turn around and you sell it for 27 again. And you make after closing costs, a $16,000 profit. Then you do that again and again and again and again. And sometimes, and then on the higher price properties, I mean, you don't always get a 90% discount, of course, right? That's not, I mean, I don't want to have anyone listen here and say like, oh, wow, I can get them for 10 cents. Some of them you do. The cheaper ones, like a $10,000 property, you can regularly buy for 1,000 and then sell it for 8 again. But then you're only making $6,000, $7,000. It gets even more interesting in the multi-$100,000 property. So how about a $300,000 property you usually don't get for 30 grand? But you might get that for $180,000, which is 60 cents on the dollar, right? And then you turn around and sell it for $230 and you make $50,000 on the deal. And that's a nice profit, because at $230, it's still a significant discount of market value, yet the $180 is still a serious offer to make to a seller. So the seller's like, yeah, I don't know, it might be worth a little bit more, but I don't care. $180,000 is a good chunk of money. I'll happy, and particularly if they have it in the family for 40 years. Perhaps they only bought it for $80,000 and now they're getting $180 for it. They're happy with it. The fact that it's worth $300 doesn't really matter. And you promise them, I mean, you also promise them a fairly quick sale, which may or may not happen, but at least they're like, yeah, somebody's taking it. Great. I get rid of the burden of property ownership. No longer want to deal with it.
Well, in my experience too, Jack, you know, there's a couple of things with land. It's usually a little bit more, it's more difficult to price, right? Because there's not as many, you know, comps out there. And it also depends on like what kind of land it is, right? Is it raw land? Has it been entitled? Right? Are there, so obviously I'm sure that are you doing any sort of value add strategies to some of these land deals that you pick up? Like, hey, I'm going to pick this up. It's 60 cents on the dollar already, but I'm going to get shovel ready and really make a profit on this thing.
You can.
Yep.
Typically, like we now teach this, for example. So our average customer student comes to us, typically goes through a transition of strategies. So they start with simple wholesaling. They get these $50,000 piece of land on a contract for 15, sell them for 35, make 20 grand and move on. Get a $30,000 per piece of land on a contract for 8, sell it for 20, make 12,000. And they just do that again and again and again and again. And soon enough, they're out of debt, they have money on the sidelines and so on. The second strategy they use then is seller financing. Because if you have a $30,000 property on a contract for 6, could you sell it for 30? And typically, if you sell it for full market value, it might sit there in the market for half a year. But if you sell it for $30,000 and allow a buyer to come in with a 20% down payment, it becomes a different game. All of a sudden, the buyers are like, yeah, I want this property, but I don't have 30 grand, but I have 6 to give you as a down payment. Well, 6 is what you need to pay the seller. So you just got what you need from the buyer, send it to the seller, you do a double closing, no money out of your pocket, they still owe you 24, and now you're getting $400 a month for the next 12 years and have that thing paid off. That's the second strategy that usually they use. And the third strategy goes back to your question. The third strategy is then typically when a deal comes in that is a more attractive, usually a little bit more higher end, a little bit more strategically positioned kind of deal. Now the Pandora's box opens, and you can do a lot of strategies. So the first two strategies probably make up 90% of everyone's deals. The third strategy that I'm about to share is about 5 to 10% of the deals, and that is in that case not so much making shovel ready. You can do that, but more interesting is actually splitting lots. Like you get this $300,000 property. And you get it under contract for 180, you take it down, and if you don't have 180, we have lots of money partners in our network. Like one of our coaching students right now did exactly that. She has a deal that she got for $60,000 and it was worth $120,000.
Okay.
So she borrowed the $60,000 from a land partner that we have in our network. And the land partner now gets a piece of the profits at the end, but they funded the full $60,000. And what she's doing it now, she's splitting the $60,000 into 4 properties, 4 lots, and selling each of them for $60,000.
Nice.
So in other words, The first deal selling actually already sold for $64,000, and after paying a realtor commission, it's 60 grand. So the first deal is enough to pay basically the lender back, and everyone has their money back. The other 3 deals is now equal $180,000 in profits. If she would have just done that deal as a traditional wholesale, she would have gotten that deal under contract for 60. It's worth 120 as it was worth 120 as is. She would have probably sold it for a 90 and made a $30,000 profit. Now she makes the lion's share of $180,000 in profits. And if she had the $160,000 in her own, if she had it in her account, she wouldn't have needed a partner. She would have made $180,000. So she and her partner together are going to make $180,000 on that deal versus only $30,000. So that's one of the strategies that we teach. Another strategy you can do is you can improve it a little bit. You can basically, for example, if a property is landlocked, you can go to the effort and getting an easement to it. And once you have the easement, the property value might quadruple. You can go and create like a building pad on it or clear it a little bit, or perhaps it has an old dilapidated mobile home on there, have it removed and just clean the land a little bit. That adds value. But typically, even to this day, I'm not doing that often because the effort is not always worth it. Sure. Instead, what I do much rather is take a lot and simply split it into 2, 3, 4, 5 smaller lots, and just then sometimes the smaller lots sell for what you bought the entire thing, and you quintuple your profits. 4x, 5x your profits.
So this all sounds great and super interesting. Now, I'm sure there are people back at home that are thinking 2 things, right? Jack, how do I find the sellers? Mm-hmm. And Jack, how do I find the buyers?
And how do I value the property? Because you said earlier that you think it's actually more complicated. It's actually not more complicated. And it's also, that's the key thing, because we're offering 30, 40, 50 cents on a dollar. It's not as crucial to be correct about the value of the property. Like in a house, if you estimate the house is $400,000, but it's really only worth $370, you just calculated yourself out of your entire profit potentially. Mm-hmm. If I have a piece of land that's worth 100, and instead I think it's worth 100, but instead it's only worth 80, but I get it for 40, I'm still making money on this deal.
Right.
I might not make $30,000, $40,000, I'll make only $20,000, but I still make money. So one of the keys is there's 5 strategies to value a property. The first one is nowadays, like when I started 23 years ago, we had no sold comps. Now Zillow, Trulia, Redfin, Realtor.com, they all have sold comparables right on their website. Right. So valuation is no longer difficult because you do it the exact same way that most people value houses. So now, but now to your original question is like, how do I find the sellers and how do I find the buyers? So the first thing is we basically pull data from big data sources. Like you can go to the county, but nowadays there's like websites like DataTree, DataQuick, CoreLogic, you name it. There's a whole bunch of different websites, places out there that for a monthly fee, you can pull out as much data as you want. 10 years ago even, they didn't have land data, but now they do. So you can go into one of these services and simply on your fingertips, and we even have a software that's tied into one of these data services, and you simply say, I want 3,000 records that are pieces of land that are zoned residential. They're in this geographical zone. Their market values between $30,000 and $1 million, where the owners live out of state, and I go down my full criteria list of different list of criteria. And then its system tells me there is 7,345 properties like that. It's like, great. I want 3,000 of them. And you simply put it in your system with owner's name, mailing address, assessed value, market value, when they bought them, what they paid for them, legal description, maps to the properties if available, and so on. And then what we do is we still heavily do direct mail, because in my opinion, it works still better than any other lead source. Why? Because we have 100 times less competition in the land world than we have in the house world. So there's probably 2-3 million people that have been trained on house wholesaling and so on. And there's probably 2,000-3,000 people in the United States that do land flipping in any kind of significant way, if that much. I just talked to a guy that does 1,000 deals a year. And he says, like, I think there's less than that. I think there's probably 1,000 to 1,500 part-time or full-time land flippers in the United States. That means, in other words, I live in Phoenix, Arizona. There's probably more house flippers and house wholesalers here in Phoenix, in the greater Phoenix area, than there's land wholesalers, land flippers in the entire United States. So we're dealing with a low competition kind of way. And then that's why direct mail works, because people don't get 27 offers and letters a day. They don't get text messages every single day. They don't get any of these things that I get. I have a portfolio of rental houses. I'm getting bombarded all week long with messages. I want to buy your house. I want to buy your house. I want to buy your house. I have 200 pieces of land, and I might get 3 or 4 letters a month on those 200 pieces of land. So that's kind of the calculation. I have only 15 rental houses. I have 800 apartment units, but only 15 rental houses. On those 15 rental houses, I'm getting probably 20 times the amount of contacts and I get on the 200 pieces of land.
Yep.
And then the other part of the question was, how do you sell these properties? So we basically go in there, we sell direct mail. You can also cold call. You can also text. All the traditional marketing strategies that are being used in real estate work here. You can even do pay-per-click. You can do other kind of things. And on the disposition side, that's an interesting thing. There's 4 strategies that we like to use to sell these properties. The first one is you can put them on the MLS, right? There's nothing wrong with putting them on the MLS. Even if you don't own the property yet, you can get a power of attorney from your seller. You can put it on the MLS through brokerless MLS services that nationwide they put it on the MLS for you for like a $99 fee. Second is we love selling to the neighbors. Because here's the thing. In the neighborhood of these lots, there's other people who own lots, and not everyone wants to get rid of their lots. It's the people, again, they've passed away, the heirs, the people that went through divorces, and the people who are just, their life and circumstances have changed. They don't want them anymore. But there's also many people who just would love to have more land. Either if it's an area half an hour outside of town, people want it because market values are going up. As the city starts approaching, the values are rising. So they're like, I want 5 more lots here because prices are going up. Or sometimes they buy them in more rural areas in order to keep other people out. They're like, if I have 10 acres here and and you're selling another 20 acres right next to mine, let me buy them so I don't get a neighbor. In other words, the reasons are wild white people, or just so I have extra land. So, I mean, if they have 10, perhaps they want 20 or 30 acres. So we sell about a third of our properties, about 30 to 35% of our properties to the neighbors. We also, over time, you're building up a buyer's list of people that are interested in that area, so you sell to them. The third strategy on MLS sells like 20-30% of the properties. And then the other realtors, you can hire a realtor who then obviously is going to put it on the MLS for you. And the fourth way, which is actually traditionally the biggest way, but currently the other ones have really gained traction, is you simply put it on a whole bunch of websites. Like you can put your your land on Zillow.com. You can put it on Facebook Marketplace.com. You're going to get, depending on the location and the quality of the land, but we've had cases where students put pieces of land on there and within 24 hours, they got something like 2,000 inquiries about the land.
Oh my gosh.
Like they're like flooded. They're like, help, what do I do? And obviously then they ended up having bidding wars. Now that's not always the case. Sometimes you put a piece of land on Facebook Marketplace and you get 10 inquiries in a week. That happens too. But even that is good because 10 inquiries with a proper follow-up should lead to a sale and within a reasonable time. So you put it on Zillow, you put it on Craigslist, you put it, Craigslist not much anymore. You put it on Facebook Marketplace, you put it into Facebook groups. If your property is 10 acres outside of Little Rock, Arkansas, then look for the Little Rock, Arkansas real estate investors. Guess what a real estate investor wants? Real estate investors love real estate, and many of them would love to have a 20-acre ranch outside of town. So if you have a 20-acre parcel outside of Little Rock, Arkansas, it makes total sense to put that listing into a Little Rock, Arkansas real estate group, because somebody there is going to be fix and flipping houses in Little Rock and basically saying like, I would love to have a 20-acre ranch, and yours pops up in the same group that is in, and they're like, let me buy that thing. Right? So there's so many different free strategies. There's also websites like landwatch.com, which is the 800-pound gorilla, gets something like 5-6 million visitors on their website per month. And all they have on their website is land, because it's called landwatch.com. And so go check that out. That's a pay for site. You have to pay to be on that page, but it's not super expensive. And again, so you put it out there. So you can do this all yourself, or you can also find a really good realtor to put the property up there for you. And then they take care of all the disposition work.
Yeah, that's interesting. And by the way, like all of those are very, I mean, like you think about it and you're like, yeah, that makes perfect sense, right? Like going to the neighbors. Obviously, they want to protect the value of their land, potentially want to expand, what they've already got. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Obviously, putting it up on all those different websites, potentially hiring help as well, makes a lot of sense to me. So I guess my question is, especially with the double closing, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're double closing these properties. So it sounds like MLS you can do by getting power of attorney. How many, as a percentage, Jack, how many of your deals close, you take ownership, full possession, and then you end up selling after a certain period of time, like versus the double closing where it's consecutive and you've basically wholesaled the property, for lack of a better word.
So
right?
my wife and I have done over 5,000 of these land deals. Wow. So we are in a blessed position that we don't have to do the double closes. We can, in a way, afford to simply go take those properties down, go on vacation, come back and sell them 3 months later or something like that. So I want to answer that question from a point of view of like, we still probably do a third of our deals with double closes just because why put your own money in it? You can use your own money for something else. But I want to answer your question from our customers, from our students' point of view. Our students probably do 95% of the deals with double closing. So it's like literally almost every single deal. It's sometimes assignments. The assignments are starting to fall a little bit out of fashion because of some of the regulations in some of the states. But double closings are not, because with a double closing, you are actually buying it. So you're technically not falling under the legal. It's my understanding. I'm not an attorney. Check with your attorney. But if you're not falling under the legal kind of characterization of doing a wholesale, you're still kind of wholesaling from a price. Low price wholesaling. The definition of wholesaling is like get it super cheap, sell it cheap. It's like a Costco model. Get it at a discount, mark it up a little bit, and still sell it at a discount. And we're still doing that. But again, our students are probably doing 95% of their deals with usually double closings, sometimes wholesaling. Sometimes if the title company doesn't allow them to do a double closing, they're doing it with the help of transactional finance. So they need 30 grand for a day, because they're selling it for $55,000 again. So they're getting $30,000 for a day, buying it that same day. They're selling it for 55, and then the 55 are being used to pay the lender back plus a fee. And the title company gets their money, and they're making like $21,000 on that kind of deal. Still, it's doing it without using your own money, which doesn't mean you shouldn't have money. I mean, it's just that. But I mean, why you don't have to use your own money for the deals. And I think that's a big benefit, because in the fix and flip world, most private lenders, they want to see you have skin in the deal, blood in the deal. They want you to at least come up with some of the money yourself. And then you're in some shape or form. They give you take a big loan on it and this and that. And it puts so much pressure on you that you just don't have to deal with here. Like you do, one of our students is a 76-year-old lady. She just, in July of this year, she did 2 deals, and she made $96,000 on one and $56,000 on the other one. So she made $150,000 in both her double closes.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, a question for you. When it comes to negotiating with the seller, right? So you're talking to the seller. It sounds like some of these deals you've been able to seller finance. So we'll talk about that in a second, right? But what are the conversations like with the seller when you're effectively saying, "Hey, I'd like to buy this property. However, I'm going to turn around and shop it while we're still in contract," right? So, how do you have? Because you're not using that dialogue, obviously. So how are you selling it to them? How are you pitching them on this?
That's a good point. So the first one is that our typical seller is somebody who is just in their mind done with the property. They have that garage sale mentality. They're like, if they want every dollar out of that deal, they're not going to give it to you. They're going to go find their own realtor and sell it. But the problem with that is that 90% of all realtors don't have the first clue how to sell land. They know how to get a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home on the market. They know how to get the photographer to come in at sunset with the right beautiful pictures. They know how to get the brokers open. They know how to put it on, how to describe it and things like that. But how do you do that on land? How do you go and get a broker's open on land? No. Do you stage land? No. So they basically treat land often as that ugly stepchild that they just put off to the side and just, somebody says, would you list my land? They're like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And they put one ugly picture under no description and just put it out there. And then what happens is the land doesn't sell.
Yep.
And then when it sits there, so the seller gets disillusioned. And that after that listing expires, perhaps half a year later, your letter arrives or your phone call arrives, and they're like, "Yeah, I guess my land is not as much worth as I thought. I'm giving it to you." So at that point, that seller's disillusioned. But there's many other reasons. So the sellers are often the people that just don't want these properties anymore, and because of that, they don't care what you do with it. They're fine. We don't necessarily have the conversation, dear Mr. Seller, while we have it under contract, we're going to market it. But our contract has a provision in there that says that while it is under contract, we are allowed to market the property, and they're signing it. We're not going to go and point it out to them. We're not going to say like, hey, listen, see this letter here? That means we're going to market it. We're just simply going to go do it, and we're going to put also the power of attorney on. And the thing is, people are just going to be like, they're excited about the chance of relieving themselves of the burden of a property that looked like it was a great idea when they bought it 30 years ago. And they perhaps used the land for 10 years, but then life and circumstances changed, and now they don't need it anymore. They don't want it anymore. They just want a little cash in their pocket. So typically we don't have that conversation, but we have everything documented that says we were willing to, that gives us the right to market it. And they're not typically also people that's going to scour the MLS and Zillow the next day, go look for their own property. It just usually doesn't happen, because if they would be, they would have the energy and the savviness and the desire to go put it on there themselves, and then it's not your seller. It's typically the sellers are those that are just like a perfect example of a seller is a lady that sold us a property about half a year ago. She was 71 years old, top fit mentally. It's no age these days anyway. And she used to be a actress, or actually a stunt double actress, in Hollywood.
Nice.
And somehow she made a bunch of money, and she bought this property in northern Arizona, but now she retired to Pennsylvania. And she's like, hey, I bought this. I thought this is where I'm going to live someday, but now I live in Pennsylvania. I don't know. I don't care what it's worth. I paid like $2,500 for it. If you pay me $4,000, you can have it. So we looked at it, and it's worth $25,000. We're like, not even negotiating. We're like, yeah, we'll take it. Right? We'll take it. We put her under contract for $4,000 or $4,500, whatever she wanted. We gave her. And 2 weeks later, we had an offer for $17,000 on the property. And she's not going to go on there. She's not going to mess about it. She just doesn't care. Occasionally it does happen. And then you got a seller that's like, what's happening? What's going on? And then you have the conversation. Listen, yeah, we're looking to resell a property. But the most important thing is you got the price that you wanted. We're marketing it up a little bit, hoping that we can resell it, that we can make a little bit money. Sometimes we do that, but if that's not okay, but we're under contract, and if that becomes a contentious discussion, then you just renegotiate with them, and they're like, no, I'm not going to honor my contract or something. I mean, they have a legally binding contract,
right?
And it happens rarely, but if it does, there's a few ways to solve that. One is to obviously force them to it, which is never what I like to do, because I want to live a peaceful life. The second way is just simply say, okay, then now if you want more money, let's how much more do you want? And they're like, well, I want X more. And if you still have a margin in there, then you do it. And if he wants all way too much and your profit margin is not much anymore, you just let it go and you move on to the next deal, because there's an abundance of deals.
Yep. 100%. That makes sense. Now, you touched on this earlier, Jack, and we've really covered a lot in like a short amount of time. So this has been awesome. Are you ever doing are you ever locking these things down with seller financing, or are you offering them straight cash and then you're the one doing the seller financing on the back end if you find a buyer?
typically we're doing the seller financing on the selling side, on the disposition side. So we are selling with seller financing. But could you do the other way around? Yes, absolutely. You can do it. Typically, it's not being done at the beginning because it's a wrap, basically. What you typically would do then is a wrap. But that's most people getting into our space at the beginning. They're just, as I said, they're first like get in a contract for 10, sell for 30. Get it for 15, sell for 35. Get it for 80, sell for 110. Like just like do those deals making $10, $20, $30,000 on this deal. Then they're like, okay, so now I'm good. Now let me optimize those deals. Because if you think about it, let's take an example of a $50,000 piece of land. Let's do a little bit of not extreme, but an example. It's a $50,000 property. Let's say you have it under contract for 10.
Yep.
Typically, you would sell that thing for 35 and make $25,000, perhaps after closing costs, $24,000. That's a good deal. Move on. If you take that property and sell it for full market value with 20% down, you get a $10,000 down payment, which is enough to pay your seller, so you have no money in the deal. And if you then, on the $40,000, you charge somewhere between like a 12 to 15% interest rate, which sounds high, but number
For
one,
land, yeah.
Number one, banks don't like to lend on land. If they do, they don't lend on an 80% loan to value, because you allowed them to buy a $50,000 property for only $10,000 down. That's an 80% loan to value. And if they do, they charge you 12, 13% the bank. So you charging them at a 50% loan to value, you charging them 15% at a 80% loan to value is very normal in our world. In that case, if you finance that thing for 15 years at $500 a month, you're making $90,000 on that deal. So it's a way to optimize the deal. Wholesale 24, seller financing 90. That's that's almost 4x higher 4x the profits. Of course, over time, but still, it's a great strategy. So, with that said, that's typically the two different ways. Could you go to a seller and say, hey, and that's particularly a strategy when, let's say you have a $100,000 property and they want 75 for it. That's more than you would ever offer in our strategy. If they're not bulking, it's like, I want $75,000, that's what I want. You could take that deal and agree with them to put 5 down and finance $70,000 at $500 a month with only like 5% interest for the next 15 years. I'm making up some numbers. I don't know if that's long enough. So you basically arrange for them that you pay them 5 down and $500 a month. And then you turn around and resell it more for like $95,000 or $100,000 with a $20,000 down payment, 15% interest, and $950 a month. You can do that. And then you basically, from each month, you receive $950 from your buyers, and you turn around and send $500 to the seller. That's a wrap, and you have a nice spread of $450. Plus, you paid the seller $5 and you're receiving $20. You have a $15,000 upfront profit. So all of this works. And if I'm running to the numbers too fast, I might want to rewatch that, or re-listen to that. But the point is, yes, you can buy from the seller with seller financing, but most people shy away from it because they're not at the beginning, because their confidence level in the system is not high enough yet.
Yep.
That they're willing to go commit themselves to a cash outflow every month without being sure that on the selling side, they can actually sell that property quickly and make the deal work. Most people want, right at the beginning, they want the sure bet. And the sure bet is the wholesale deal. You make money, you walk away. You make money, you walk away. You make money, you walk away. Particularly if you use like the double closings, then you don't even use your own money at all.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. And the logical next question, and the one that's been percolating in my mind this whole time, Jack, is what markets are you focused in with this? And it sounds like you've got coaching clients all over the country. So I'm not sure if the answer is, well, you want to go where you're familiar, or we want to go to your backyard. But where have you seen the most amount of success implementing this strategy?
You want to go where there's land. Just Now,
Yeah.
it's actually, we don't just have students in the US. We actually have people all over the world doing that, because the
Fantastic.
real beauty of this business is because it's land. There's no tennis audits and termites. There's nothing to inspect. So if I put a piece of land on a contract, I pull up Google Maps, Google Street View, Google Earth, the counties, aerial geographical information systems, satellite imagery, Google Street View, all these different things. And with that, I don't ever have to go visit a property myself. And that on its own makes it able for anyone to do this literally from anywhere in the world. So I have somebody that does that, a few people in Germany that do like 50, 60, one guy even 300 deals from Europe per year, 300 deals per year, between 50 and 300 deals a year, several people from Europe in the United States. The lady I talked about that had a $60,000, $120,000 property, and she got it for 60, and she split it into 4. She actually lives in southern Germany, and I'm originally from Germany, so she lives an hour away from my hometown.
Oh, wow.
And she is doing those deals. She has made 6 figures in 2024 and is on track for multiple 6 figures in 2025, living in Germany, being married, having a full-time job, and 2 kids under 3. So you can do this from anywhere. And therefore, the answer to your question I was only half jokingly, you can do this anywhere in the United States where there's land. With that said, there is a little bit, and I do agree. I'm spilling it all out, but it's okay. It's fine. That there's plenty of space for all of us. It works everywhere. I've seen people do lots of great deals in upstate New York, as well as in Florida, as well as in Texas, as well in California. People say that California land is not cheap. Well, land in LA is not cheap, and land in San Francisco and land in San Diego is not cheap. But California is humongous and has lots of land that you could pick up cheap. I've probably done something like 700-800 deals in California. So it works everywhere. If anything, there's a little bit of a tendency to go into the states where the winters are short. And very simply, that is for the reason that if you do land in Minnesota, and Minnesota has like, isn't that the lake, the state of the 1,000 lakes or something like that, or 10,000 lakes?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
There's like a gazillion lakes. So on the lakes, there's lakefront property and things. The rural, it's beautiful and desirable. But Minnesota is also under ice half of the year.
Yeah.
So your selling season, therefore, is shorter because people are more hesitant to go out there in winter to look at the property. Plus, they can't even see the property because all they see is a bunch of snow. So that doesn't mean you can't do deals in Minnesota. It just means that perhaps you load up in the winter and you sell them in the summer, or it just means that your marketing season and your picture taking season and the season where people are actually going to go out and look at the land is shorter. So you probably need to balance out Minnesota with Tennessee or something like that, or Minnesota with another state. And there's nothing wrong with doing deals in 2 states. Like one of our Hall of Fame students that lives in Maine and does deals in Florida and in Alaska. And so in Alaska, he's only selling in the summer, and in Florida, his business is year round.
Gotcha. Okay. And that makes perfect sense to me, right? Like, you know, selling land and let's say it how it is. Cause I have tons of friends who sell real estate and actually have a bunch of friends in Minnesota, believe it or not. And, the real estate market in general slows down during the winter season. Yeah. It's not just for land. It's literally all real estate, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Because you're up there hibernating, because who wants to go out at minus 10 degrees?
No, 100%, 100%. We're running up here on time, Jack. I did have a couple of final questions here for you. Sure. You've mentioned some of the tax benefits that are associated with buying land and doing these types of deals. So what are some of the tax benefits that to this strategy that maybe people wouldn't necessarily be aware of, or some strategies that are really, make this an even, more juicy kind of like opportunity than what we've already discussed?
So the one thing is, like, there's unfortunately not many tax benefits. The reason I mentioned taxes is because people that own the properties are sick and tired of paying property taxes, and that's why they're willing to give them up cheap. But unfortunately, there's no depreciation in land. And so you cannot write off anything when you do a land deal. So, I mean, you write off your business expenses, but you cannot write off the piece of land like you write off a multifamily property or things like that. Which, by the way, this is the reason why we are also in multifamily. That's why we have 800 apartment units. So this year we bought a multifamily property with 91 units, and the bonus depreciation from that thing is going to be something like $600,000 that comes to us, and it's going to help me wipe out $600,000 of the income that I'm making from my land business. But with that said, there's a few strategies, there's a couple of things, and one of them, and that is really a little bit more for the advanced real estate investor. So I'm going to keep it as simple as possible if anyone listening is brand new. And that is the following. If you do a lot of deals, the IRS declares you're a dealer. When you're a dealer, there's nothing wrong with a dealer. You're not a drug dealer or anything like that. You're just a dealer, right? Dealer just means you buy and sell something frequently. And obviously the drug dealers on the corner do that, but the car dealers do that too. And anyone that sells something frequently is a dealer. So if you're a dealer, and you're doing the seller financing strategy where you basically allow somebody to pay down 10% down or 20% down and then make the monthly payments, the IRS says that it doesn't matter how much they pay you down, you got to pay taxes on the profits on day one. So if you buy a property for $1,000, sell it for $10,000, even though you only get a $1,000 down payment, you have on paper a $9,000 profit. The IRS says you owe us taxes on the $9,000. It's actually a huge problem. Now imagine you're doing 30 deals like that. You have $300,000-$400,000 in income and in paper income, but you only receive $30,000 as a down payment. You got a problem. Well, the good news is there's a loophole in the IRS that basically says for land only. By the way, if you do that same thing for houses, you have a problem. But if you do that for land, the IRS, there's a loophole in the tax statutes that says that if essentially in layman's terms says, if you buy a piece of land and you sell it with seller financing, and in the process in the middle, you did not change the land, so you did not entitle it, develop it, rezone it, or things like that, then you're exempt from the dealer status. In other words, if you're now buying it for $1,000, selling it for $10,000, getting $1,000 down payment, you only pay taxes on the profit portion of the $1,000 that you actually received. And that is huge because now that means that your tax liability, you spread out over the entire length of the loan. That is humongous. And that basically means that you only pay taxes off the money that you actually received, which means you actually can pay the taxes because you received the money.
Yeah,
now,
that's
on top
fascinating.
of that, you then add all the other kind of other things, like you buy some improved property that has depreciation that offsets these things, and soon enough you don't pay taxes.
And that's every real estate investor's goal, right?
So, well, we've been talking a lot about the benefits of land flipping, right, Jack? What about some of the drawbacks? You know, maybe give us one or two things that people should be aware of before they get into land flipping as potential setbacks, drawbacks, cons, if you will.
Yeah, so there's not really many cons. There's just some things you might want to know of. Like sometimes, obviously, the reason why you're getting a piece of land is for cheap is because it might have a couple of problems. So it might be landlocked. So a lot with a road to it might be worth $100,000. Without the road to it, it might be only worth $30,000. So you got to be aware of those things before you see like, oh, other properties are worth 100. Let me offer 40. Well, you just overbid on this property because as it is not worth 40. It's not worth 100. It's probably only worth 30. So make sure you know those kind of things and you learn those things. And obviously we teach those things. But also within that is the opportunity. Because if you now can go and you can go talk to some of the neighbors and get them to give you an easement, now you unleash $70,000 in value for that property. Because if it's only worth 30, you probably only offered 10, and now you got $100,000 property in your hands. It's just a little bit of extra work to do this. Right? The other thing is that sometimes properties have title issues. So you got to you make sure that you work with a really good title company. So in other words, don't spend the money before you make it, because sometimes you get a really smoking deal. Somebody accepts a $2,500 offer for a $30,000 property and you're like, oh my God, so excited. I'm going to make all this money. And then you send it to the title company to do the title search. And it turns out that it needs probate and that there's 17 heirs and things like that. But that's just the worst case there is that the deal falls apart. So it's not inherently really a problem. The biggest problem that is really not a problem at all, but the biggest problem that's being brought up to me always as a question is, well, what if somebody spilled some environmental toxic stuff on the land? And if you look at that, that is also almost never a problem because environmental issues usually are only an issue if your property is in an industrial zone or very close to an industrial zone, where there's like for decades, they put like chemicals all over the place. It's right next to a gas station or so. And that's really it. But most of our land, if it's in the city, is usually in a residential area. So there's houses everywhere and there's 3 empty lots. Well, guess what? All these houses, before anyone bought these houses or before the builder even bought these lots, they did an environmental test and they would have never bought it if it wouldn't have passed it. So you can pretty much assume these are clean. The second kind of properties, the properties that are like 20, 30, 40 minutes outside of town, by definition, there's no gas station there. There's no there's electricity there, but there's no gas station there. There's no chemical factory there, so they're not an issue. And the third kind of property, which is more like the mini ranch, which is in high demand right now, it's a rural mini ranch. There's no environmental issues here either. The only issues you ever run into is if you start buying in commercial pockets, infill situation where there's a whole bunch of like chemical and oil kind of factories and companies around there, and just simply stay away from that.
Yeah, no, this is all great, man. And by the way, you've mentioned the coaching program a couple of times. We will link in the show notes below a link to get more information on that for Jack, and we'll also have his social media handles and how to get in touch with him. You've been a wealth of information, my friend. This has been awesome. Definitely lots of, wheels are spinning and lots of food for thought. And as is tradition here, Jack, on the Gould Mine, we will have you lead the audience before you leave with one final Gould nugget. Take it away.
Ooh, okay. I wasn't prepared for that. Hopefully I can bring one out from me here. One gold nugget is that what allowed my wife and I to be successful at coming as immigrants from Germany and Honduras, respectively, without any knowledge of real estate whatsoever. Nobody in my family is in real estate. Nobody of my wife's family is in real estate. Was simply the fact that we looked for something that was simple enough for us to do. Like we tried all kinds of stuff. We tried to fix and flip and we failed. We luckily never got started with it. We would have lost our shirt. We tried a wholesale deal and we estimated everything wrong and we luckily backed out of that thing. So what I tell people is like, in order to succeed, try to find something that completes the 2 criteria. Number 1, you really enjoy it. You really think it's fun and could be fun and could be a lot of and sexy in a way. And number 2, it's not so complicated that you give up halfway through. Like, for example, multifamily. We do now multifamily. We buy 100 units at the time and things. Compared to land flipping, it's 1 million times more complicated. Like 1 million times more complicated. I cannot conceive how somebody could be a beginner and get into multifamily and not screw up left and right because there's so many moving pieces. I know I would have lost my shirt. I would have completely failed at that. Does it mean it's a bad strategy? No, it's a fantastic strategy once you understand real estate, right? With land flipping, we were able to be successful because it has so much simpler thing. And the same applies to anything out there. So pick something that you can actually get your arms around, that you can understand, that you can have fun with. And then you'll actually do it because otherwise you won't do it.
I love that, man. No, that's great advice. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that could use that. Jack, you have been awesome, man. Thank you so much for stopping by and look forward to your continued success, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
All right, cool.